We're going from tech to humans because this is an important thing that we seem to have forgotten, which is that tech can't solve every problem that comes in front of us. And what I want to do before we start is just ask a few people, who wastes food? You may put your hand up. Oh, good. We've got some honest people here, Lucas. This is handy.
This is nice.
When you waste your food, is it leftovers or compost? Leftovers? Oh, that's even more honest people. This is handy. And compost? Oh, even better. You live in an environment or you have a garden. This is handy. Now, over to you.
It's nice to see a few hands up of people being able to admit a problem. The first way to solve a problem, the first step is to admit that we have a problem. And Australia, like all countries, has a problem. Around 300 kilos of food is lost and wasted every single year in Australia per person. That's a huge amount. And if you think about it in yourself, that works out to around 6 kilos per person per week. A huge amount. It's not just an Australian problem, it's an international problem, and it's something that is going across boundaries. It's worth 1.5 trillion Australian dollars a year of food that just goes straight into the ground, and it's around 1/3 of all food that is produced. It's also, when we're thinking about it, it's responsible for about 10% of the greenhouse gases that are responsible for global heating. So not only by us throwing our food away, we're actually not just wasting money, but we're also impacting the environment for the future. And finally, when we think about food waste, the amount of food we produce, we have enough food in this planet to feed every single person, but we don't. And part of that is that the food goes to the wrong places and often it's going into the ground. So when we think about food waste, yes, not all food waste, and I used the term before, food loss and waste. It's not all our fault. Around 1/3 of what that 300 kilos is what happens in our household. 2 kilos per person a week is thrown out. Goes out, it wasn't eaten, it was the food that it was expired, it was the stuff we bought from Uber Eats that didn't quite get around to eating. It's also the stuff that we may put into the compost heap, the stuff that we feel better about because we've got the new green bins that Melbourne City Council has given us and we can put it in there and it's out of our problem anymore. So when we think about food waste, it's around everywhere. When we think of it in the retail context for consumers, that most of the food that happens and the reason why we have an excess amount of food waste comes from poor purchasing habits. We go to the supermarket when we're hungry, we go and buy too much, we have food that is expired, we buy things that are on sale that we don't need, and there's also the one thing that we're going to focus a bit on today, which is date label confusion. That we get food and we're told that it's best before a specific day, or we get told how to store it, but it's not how we're best storing it, and we throw away something that is potentially edible. But I want to get Linda to talk about the next step about this.
I'm going to stay seated because, anyway, I would like to identify the elephant in the room of food waste that we've all, and I'm so grateful to you, put our hands up and said we waste food. But how many of you wasted food that you had no choice but to purchase? And how many of you wasted food that was a bit of a surprise to you? And I'm assuming that most of us, particularly in this environment, don't waste food intentionally. There's always an unintentional consequence to some behavioural outcome. The big elephant in the room for us, and this is something we've been working on for the last far too many years, but at least 5 years, is that industry, producers, supply chain, manufacturers, labellers, retailers, and in Australia we have a particular problem because of the way that our food retailing industry is structured. All of that system has a role to play in reducing food waste. And the problem we're facing is getting people to accept responsibility for that. Like, your role is this and your role is that, and how about we think about letting consumers buy ugly food, for example, letting consumers buy smaller lots, for example, and not smaller lots that One classic one that's come up in this last week is the ability to buy a piece of meat from Woolies or Coles, and you can't. You can only buy a pre-packaged 500 or 1 kilogram lot of whatever it is, and then the steaks are all different sizes anyway. So it is a problem. So we termed this the food waste fairy because we need some magical thinking here. We need people to figure it out and not just blame the consumers who have zero control over what retailers do, producers produce, and so on. And that magical thinking has created what we call a wicked problem. Whose job is it? How do we get them to take responsibility? We have some consumers here who are willing to accept that they have a role in that, but there are many, many consumers who don't accept that they have a role in it. And to the point where we had a piece of research that we did last year, the year before, last year, where we got people to take photographs of their bins, and we analysed how much food waste was in the bins, and then we followed up with a piece of research that asked people about food waste, and nobody wasted any food whatsoever. Nothing was wasted, because by the time it ends up in the bin, it isn't even compost, that's just scraps, or that's just something else. So people's capacity to rename the problem is awe-inspiring. And there we have Lukas. The other thing is date labels.
So when we're looking at all of these things, there's a whole bunch of stuff that's causing us to waste food. And one of those is that something that we've been focusing on really heavily for the last few years, and I've created a lot of work for us for the next few years thinking about it, and it's date labels and storage advice instructions. This is quite possibly frankly, the most idiotic piece of packaging that we've got here, which is salt. Salt with an expiry date. Now, the salt was on the ground, it was there for millions of years, and then suddenly it got put into a jar and it is able to be expired. We have lots of different products that are focused on there, and not always, frankly, idiotic. There's lots of different types of labels. But in our case, what we've been doing is working with End Food Waste Australia to develop or reimagine the way that we could give bits of information to help people to make better decisions and perhaps not throw away food. That idea of best before, where it says best, and now if I don't eat it after that date, it's not the best, is something that terrifies a lot of people. And so we're thinking about how we can potentially reimagine those. Labels won't solve food waste, but they'll provide behavioural infrastructure to assist people to reduce their own waste. So as part of that work, what we've been doing is we've been having lots of in-depth, rich conversations using collective intelligence and speaking to a hell of a lot of people. We've been speaking to government bodies, we've been speaking to industry, both in terms of supermarkets and producers and retailers. And what we found is that everybody looked like this when we were pointing out and asked them where the food waste was coming and who caused the problem. The governments were blaming the retailers were blaming the government, and the consumers saying it was the consumers bought it and then they waste it. The consumers said, well, we don't know what's going on, that we buy too much and everybody hates the supermarkets and everybody hates the government. So we've got this circle of people just not knowing what to do. But one of the key things that came across in our research was this idea of TMI. We're getting far too much information every day, and actually people find it so confusing on what to buy and how to buy it. Here's the example of the classic jar that we have in every single household in Australia with pieces of information on it. Lots of it. Things from whether it's suitable for celiacs, how to recycle the jar. And at the moment, when we're looking at the bottom, the best before is at the bottom of the jar. The reality is it's Vegemite. It'll probably outlive us again like salt. One of the things that we've found with all of our industry people is a sense of asterisks and asteriskification. Everybody wants to put their asterisk on the back of the jar so that they can protect themselves. We speak with industry and they're concerned about poisoning people. We've got health professionals and they're concerned about making people fatter. We have the people who are putting the recycling logos and they're wanting to make sure that they've ticked the boxes that we've got on there. And all of it is about trying to reduce risk. we've got a whole bunch of asterisks across the back of the jar, and consumers are going, well, that's far too much information. It's first year marketing for an advertising or a marketing student is clutter. There's clutter everywhere, and people can't actually get the information that we need, and literally everybody is just protecting themselves. So when we're thinking about, when we're reimagining these labels, we need to think beyond what we want to tell people. It's actually, what do they need to know? And I'm going to hand to Linda to talk about and close this off where we're at today.
What we need to know is just enough as consumers to enable us to make the decisions we need to reduce the amount of food waste. That's information. But we also need what Lukas framed before as the behavioural infrastructure. You need to have portion sizes that match family households. You need to have the ability to purchase products that you want that will be fresh. You need the ability to tell how fresh something is. And I'm going to make an assumption here that everyone has wasted an avocado in the last 12 months, because avocados are like ripe, too ripe, now gone green. So, or black in the case of a particular type of avocados. So how do we tell when we're purchasing? And it's not an intractable problem. It is actually a technology solution to a certain extent at the retailer's thing. But we need to be mindful when we're purchasing that we're not feeding into this whole let's buy more, which increases the profit margins of the people in the supply chain and just shifts that profit loss onto us as consumers. So we can be mindful about it. We can eat leftovers. We can get a bigger freezer if we need one, if you can. Those sorts of problems of access and equity are possibly relatively intractable at the moment. But there are definitely ways to work on this problem without magical thinking, without hoping that that fairy's going to come along and solve the problem. So, who wastes food? We all do.
We all do.
Every one of us. And we just need to try to be mindful of that and push. If you think this is wrong, tell the store manager that I don't need a kilogram of apples. I would really like just one. Thank you very much.